Greetings, YouTube pipe smokers. This is PlanxtyPipes with another video. It's been a while since my last one. It was kind of an unplanned absence. I've actually been reading a really good book, and it's taking up most of my evenings these days. It's been a while since I really got into a great book, and I've just kind of been enjoying that. The book that I'm reading, if you're interested, is called, actually got it right here, Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. It's a fantasy novel, which I really like. I like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, or Song of Ice and Fire. And those, I've read those all multiple times. And so this is a book that my cousin got me for my birthday this year. And it was one that I've been wanting to read for a while, but never got around to picking it up. And he happened to buy it for my birthday because he's really into fantasy novels and knows that I like them too. So he hasn't read it, but he picked it up because we both wanted to read the series. And so far it's fantastic. Usually when I get a new book, I'll start reading it, and it takes me maybe 50 pages or something to get really into it. This book, from like page 1, I was just really sucked in. The setup for the story is awesome. The characters are really good. It does a good job in the beginning of building up tension and kind of making things exciting right from the get-go. There's not a whole lot of establishment of the world and the characters before it jumps right in, because a lot of that establishment is done through the narration of the novel. It's actually, the vast majority of it is told in first person by the main character that the story is about. He's a legendary hero in this world, and a person called a chronicler comes and finds him because he wants to write down his story for posterity. And so it takes a little convincing, but the main character, whose name is Quoth, he decides that he's going to impart his story over the course of 3 days to the chronicler. And each book in the series, it's a trilogy, a planned trilogy, I think, because I think only the first 2 books are written at this point. But each book is 1 day of the storytelling. So this is kind of like the establishing background story, setting everything up for the next 2 books. And it's just awesome. And I know a lot of pipe smokers tend to be readers. So I wanted to talk a little bit about books in this video. First, before I go any further, let me talk about what I'm smoking. This is my Stanwell Silky Brune 139, and I am smoking Dunhill's Elizabethan mixture in it. It's only the second time I've smoked this. I popped a tin of it a couple of days ago, and it's really, really good. The thing that stood out to me immediately was the tin note, because it's very unique in my opinion. It's kind of subtle, but to me it smells like fruit roll-ups, which is kind of that stewed fruit kind of smell that a lot of people describe in Perique. It's a vapor. And I've never had a vapor that I've really smelled that kind of stewed fruit smell in. But this, it was immediately, the first thing I smelled was like, this smells just like a fruit roll-up, like the memory of the way a fruit roll-up smells from my childhood. So, yeah, it's cool tin note, and it's very, very smooth. It's super easy to smoke. The smoke is super creamy. It's just like nothing harsh about it, just very easy to smoke, very pleasant and relaxing, and I'm really enjoying it. So I think I'm going to buy some more of this and see how it ages. I think, this tin is maybe a year old or so. I bought it in a mix of Dunhill tins that I got, and good stuff. So, on to a little bit about books. The kind of books that I tend to read, obviously fantasy novels are one of the things. My dad was a big fantasy reader when I was growing up, and he's the one that got me into them. And I remember reading The Hobbit at a very young age and attempting to read Lord of the Rings. I didn't successfully read that until I was much older. But one of the first authors that he really got me into was Terry Brooks. He really liked Terry Brooks, the Shannara series and the Magic Kingdom for Sale series. And so I read both of those when I was in my early teens. And I remember just being obsessed with them. Like, I remember reading one of the books in my microbiology class in high school, like having my book bag on top of my desk with my book propped up behind it and kind of my microbiology books on top of my book bag. So it looked like I was following along in microbiology, and I was reading a Terry Brooks novel, which I did horrible in that class. So it's pretty, wasn't a very good idea for my studies, but man, I just love those books. And a lot of people kind of considered Terry Brooks early on as kind of a hack, Tolkien ripoff guy. The first book in his Shannara series, The Sword of Shannara, is basically a direct ripoff of Lord of the Rings. It's pretty funny, actually reading it now. I went back and read it a few years ago, and the whole time I was thinking, man, he basically just took the basic plot of Lord of the Rings and changed a few things around and changed some characters around. And it was his first book, written in the 70s. And it was obvious he was a huge Tolkien fan. Second book in the series totally departs from that. That's the only book of his that's really kind of a Tolkien ripoff. But it's set in a very Tolkien-esque world. And it's a good series. If you like fantasy, I suggest it. It's not as high fantasy as some of the others, but it's a very enjoyable, quick read, easy to read. So Terry Brooks is one that my dad got me into, and then Terry Goodkind is another one who wrote the Sword of Truth series, which I read most of that. I started losing interest in it because I had kind of read up to the point that he had written the books and he was still writing them, and it was a few years between books, and I just kind of started seeing the repetitiveness in it and lost interest. But they're really good books. If you like fantasy, that's another good series. Obviously, I've mentioned Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin. Those are awesome. I read those long before the TV show on HBO came out, and it was immediately at the top of the heap for me. The political intrigue and the brutal reality of the world sucked me in. The characters are phenomenal. Anyone who's watched the movie or the TV series you need to do yourself a favor and read those books because they're way, way better. And a lot of the stuff has been changed around, especially in the later seasons from what I hear. I kind of watched the first couple of seasons and then kind of stopped watching it. And the books are really where it's at for me. The character of Tyrion Lannister in the books is so much better. I mean, don't get me wrong. Peter Dinklage in the TV series is awesome, and Tyrion's a cool character, but Tyrion in the books is just like one of the best fantasy characters of all time. So that's a series I really like. And then obviously The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Tolkien's, the real originator of what now is considered high fantasy. And he was so different. He's so different than everyone else just because I think the stories to him were almost secondary to the world that he created. That was where he really loved the language and the kind of history that he created, because he mourned there not being a history for England like some of the other great myths, like the history of the Vikings, the Norse mythologies, and he wanted that kind of mythology for England. And the depth and the richness of his world is unparalleled, and it's hauntingly beautiful, in my opinion, to sound kind of silly about it and to elevate it to a plateau that I don't know if any book really deserves. But to me, those books are head and shoulders above anything else that I've ever read fiction-wise. There's never going to be anything like it, I don't think. So, fantasy obviously is a type of book that I really like. I also really like military books and war books. Like the book Band of Brothers by Stephen E. Ambrose is really good. If you've seen the HBO series that it's based off of, the series is fantastic and the book's really good too. But then I also like modern military books too, like American Sniper was good, Lone Survivor was good. Marcus Luttrell, who wrote Lone Survivor, did another book called Service that's really good. And I don't know, some of the books about special forces or special operations training, Navy SEAL training, that kind of stuff, I'm kind of interested in those. So I've started reading some of those more in the last couple of years. There's some classic books that I really like Alexandre Dumas's Three Musketeers. I remember reading that in high school and just being knocked out by it. It was one of those ones that you pick up and you can't put down. I loved that book. And there's also religious theology books that I like. C.S. Lewis's books I like. Mere Christianity is a good one. The Great Divorce is really good. Screwtape Letters is really good. So I like some of his books. There's more books in that vein. If people are interested, I can do other book series or book videos talking about different series that I really like and going more in depth. I'm sure at some point I'll do a Tolkien video because there's so much to cover with that. And in my experience, a lot of guys that smoke pipes really like Tolkien. Obviously, pipes are all throughout his books. Kind of mentioned in passing, or in they're just part of the fabric of the world. And I think a lot of people get inspired to smoke pipes. I know that was part of the reason that I picked up a pipe, is because I saw the way that they were dealt with in his fantasy novels, and just it seemed very relaxing and enjoyable and good for contemplation. And the way that he talks about pipes without going too in depth about it, just kind of, it's something that his characters do, was interesting to me. So just a quick video talking a little bit about some of the books that I like. I was inspired to do it by the fact that I've just been really enjoying Name of the Wind, and it's one of those page turners that I just haven't been able to put down. So every night I've pretty much been coming outside and smoking my pipe and reading that book. And there's something about smoking a pipe and reading a book that's just really relaxing and a good way to unwind, in my opinion. I really like it. So if anybody out there has any books that you love, any fantasy series that you really like that you want to suggest, I'd be happy to see them in the comments, or any kind of book that you really like. I'm always interested in finding new books. And yeah, thanks for watching. This is PlanxtyPipes, and hope you all had a great day, and I'll see you soon.